Absolutely. And the thing is, I think the one thing that you hit from the beginning is massive action always beats perfect planning. Because what'll happen is as you get into that moment of massive action, what's going to happen is you're going to see things that you'll never see in the planning phase. And so you're able to react and adapt to it. That's why, I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the idea with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that you're going to get into action. You're going to try these things and see if they actually work.
Yeah.
A lot of martial arts, they actually never get into the combat phase.
No.
And so they think what they're doing works so cool, but then when they actually apply it in the combat phase, they're like, ooh, that actually does not work. And so that's the greatest thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that you actually get into that testing mode. And welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, and the Mentoring podcast. Today is a special episode. This is one of my favorite episodes. And the reason why this is one of my favorite episodes, this is episode number 50. And episode number 50, it's just a number. I get it. But the idea is we've been able to cross on the podcast, on the Money, the Mindset, and the Mentoring podcast, meeting 50 absolutely amazing people and producing wonderful content and subsequently starting some amazing relationships. And one of those relationships, and now certainly was started way before starting the idea of podcasting, was episode number 1, which was with Andre Chin. Now, Andre, first of all, I want to thank you so much for helping me really realize the importance of going down this journey of just getting out and start making things happen. And the first thing was obviously making things happen in the podcasting journey. Because your podcast, it's been something that's been great for you. And for me, it's been life-changing for doing the podcast for us. We've been able to create great content, create great relationships, and really create revenue opportunities through podcasting. So it's been amazing. And it's all, I have to say, thanks to you for getting me going on this. So first of all, episode number 50 wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for my conversation with you. So thank you, Andre.
Do I get to take credit for that? Because I remember that conversation and you were kind of back and forth. Do I do this? Do I not do this? Et cetera, et cetera. And it doesn't quite relate to some of the stuff we do in a day to day. And I think you get it and I get it. It's like, what's the point of the exposure? What's the point of having it? Why do you guys have podcasts? And I think podcasting has changed so much over the last, I'd say year to year and a half. And there's a reason that, everyone that's doing anything has a podcast, whether it's Cardone, whether it's, Zuckerberg or this, or every single person is sharing what they know. And I saw this thing the other day and it said, when you can start to share your experiences from the heart and from an authentic place, that's what people are really craving. And so whether it's real estate, mortgages, it doesn't matter the industry. If you don't have a platform that you are sharing about who you are and why you're valuable, you're dead in the water and there's nothing special about you. And so we used to be able to do this through booklets or flyers or emails, but the attention span of human beings is so goddamn short that nobody is reading anything. Like you put a piece of paper in front of someone and they're almost offended that you did. But when people can listen to you and hear from you, it really changes how you show up for them. And it gives you way more validity, even though you're saying the exact same thing you might have said on the phone or on a booklet. Now you've got some validity because you're saying it with another human present and you're creating relationships with someone. So I think I'm shocked that more people aren't doing it. I think one of those hurdles is they don't know where to start. Kind of like when we were talking, it's like, what do I talk about? Where do I start? Where do I go? And, I taught this class recently and somebody said, hey, one of my fears is that I'm not interesting. And I said, well, that's where you're wrong. I said, everybody's interesting in some way, shape, or form. I said, but the missing link is, are you interested in anybody else? Because it's not about yourself. It's never about us. It's always about who we're talking to. And so that's why these conversations with you are so great. And I hadn't had a chance to thank you yet because I'm honored to be on number 50. It's kind of a big deal for me to kind of get that nod and to get the first one and to see where we started and where you are today. And even just that journey through your podcasting journey has changed. So thank you for having me.
Oh, no worries. And it was great because when we did the first podcast, if you go back and listen to it, it's funny because at the beginning I say, welcome to my podcast, because I didn't even know what the name of the podcast was going to be. And so I stumbled through, I think I had a lot of ums and ahs and and rights and all these things. And I sort of cringe when I go back and look at it. but I also feel that it's a good representative thing to leave there because it can show the journey that's happened. Because that's an inception point that happened. And then
100%.
if we look, yeah, and if we look from today to where we are, or from back then to where we are today, we've gone from having one podcast to now we have a whole ecosystem. I think we have, in our community, we have about 63 resellers of our podcasting services business that help people launch their podcasts. And we have, I think, 100 or so podcasts, a few hundred podcasts under management. And that's since September. And really since January,
change, right? Because I'm going to bet when we started this conversation, and I'm looking at becoming a client as well, because you've kind of gone in a whole different direction from where you've started. So have I, in my podcasting speaking journey and things like that. And I think people get so hung up with trying to figure it all out up front, and it's like, dude, just start. Just get something out there. It's going to be crap. Like I looked at, so one of my YouTube channels for my team was recently locked down and I had no idea. So people were like messaging me going, hey, I can't find this video and that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're all on the YouTube page. So I went and looked and somehow YouTube took offense to something I said somewhere on it and actually shut down the page. So I had to appeal and I got it back yesterday. And I scrolled to the bottom to one of my very first posts and it was the most atrocious. Can I swear? Are we swearing?
Sure, yeah,
Are we okay? It was one of the most atrocious piece of shits I've ever done in history. And I pulled it up and I showed someone and they went, oh my God, I remember filming that for you. And wow, I didn't want to tell you then, but I was making fun of you the entire time.
That's amazing.
And it was something so simple. I think it was like a market report or something, just absolutely generic. But at the time when I did it, nobody else was doing them on video. And so I kind of looked at it and said, okay, how can I be different from everybody else? And how can I do something that nobody else is doing just quite yet? Everyone's emailing it. I need to go to video. And so here it is. We made this video. We edited it in iMovie, had no idea what we were doing even there. And we put this thing out and it's still getting views to this day. And it's horrible. So I don't think it matters. Like I'm so embarrassed. And I almost went to take it down. I clicked on it, kind of like you said, right? Like you're happy that you have it because it's a great litmus to where I start.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I love it. And I would say to everybody, like get started on something. Like if you don't want to host it, then go be a guest somewhere, right? Like start being a guest on other people's podcasts and sharing your knowledge and your wealth, because this is now the space. Like Steve, you and I we're old dogs. And so you probably had an encyclopedia the same way I had an encyclopedia.
Yeah, National Geographic books.
Right. Right. We had all the books, right? And so I remember having the books, and I don't think we had them all because my mom picked the relevant ones and she didn't get the whole set. And I was like, where's
You're just not good at the letter F. Like everything else is good, but letter F, you just can't talk about that topic.
Just don't have it. Yeah. And so, that's how we used to learn. Well, now, if you aren't in the content space of some sort, people aren't learning from you and you have nothing to give. And the world has sort of changed where whether it was our government or the school boards or whoever, that was the only way we could get information, right? Yeah. We had to go to the encyclopedia, go to the library, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now we live in a world that, Gary Vee talks about it all the time, where information is readily available. There's no blockage to information anymore. And so if you aren't in the space and you aren't giving information, you kind of become really, really irrelevant really fast. And it's happening to businesses and people all over the world.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I think the one thing that you hit from the beginning is massive action always beats perfect planning. Because what'll happen is as you get into that moment of massive action, what's going to happen is you're going to see things that you'll never see in the planning phase. And so you're able to react and adapt to it. That's why, I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the idea with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that you're going to get into action. You're going to try these things and see if they actually work. Yeah. A lot of martial arts, they actually never get into the combat phase.
No.
And so they think what they're doing works so cool. But then when they actually apply it in the combat phase, they're like, ooh, that actually does not work. And so that's the greatest thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that you actually get into that testing mode. And the same thing applies with podcasting. You're going to go listen to your episode after you've done it. And you go, that was horrible. Post it.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is you're going to think, oh my gosh, nobody actually came and burned me on this. Cool. Now I'm going to post it again, but maybe I'll post something that's a little bit better. And then the next I'm going to post something and make it even better. And each iteration, the iterative process beats the planning process every time.
And you touched on that, right? Like, and so for anyone listening, if Steve invites you to come and hit stuff with him, that's a really fun adventure. And you talk about massive action. I think we talked about it, and you're like, why don't you come out? And so I went out for a few weeks. I'm really tired at 5 a.m. when Steve wants to be really high energy, and I love it because I'm up anyway. And so I go, and I think the biggest complaint I had was, man, I hate driving a half an hour to come out and do this. But here's what I learned through that. I learned that I can do it with you at any point in time, and I wasn't absolutely terrible at it. I wasn't great, but I wasn't complete dog shit. And the second piece of that is it actually kicked off the Now Fitness journey. And if you put the two videos up aside, like where I was and where I am today, I think we're down a total of almost 40 pounds. And that's the joy of massive action. I was kind of saying that to you, and you're like, well, okay, if you're not going to come back, don't go be a fat ass. And I remember you telling me that, and I was like, I think I said that will never happen. And then I went home, looked in the mirror, and I was like, because you're already there.
Because you're there. You can't go to become something you already are.
You're already there. Right? And so it just started that massive journey for me over the last year. And it then set into a commitment. That simple conversation set a commitment in me that said, I'm going to get in the best shape of my life in my 40s, as opposed to people going, oh, when you get to 40, it all goes downhill. I was like, there's no chance. But if I didn't take from that simple invite, because we were at lunch or something, and you said, why don't you just come out and try it? And I could have said no, and I could have dragged it out. I could have waited another 90 days and everything else. And I was like, cool, when? And you were like, Monday at 5. And I was like, okay, Monday it is. And so we came out, or it might have been the Wednesday. I can't remember specifically. But that tipped the first domino. We talk about the one thing, we talk about all these different things, and that first domino being the hardest to tip. But people think, was it 32 dominoes is taller than Mount Everest if you were to stack them together? And people don't realize how something so simple, 2 inches, but when tipped over time, gives you this ginormous thing. And then the second piece of that is, I'm a big fan of Cody Sanchez. Like, I love her content. I love what she puts out there because it's pretty raw and it's pretty real. And she made that comment where, she could tell you how successful someone is and how long they take to order their coffee. And I remember sitting with you and we were ordering lunch and we were both just like, I'll take this and this and this and have a good day. And it's almost like the server looked at us like, these guys are a-holes. And I was like, but we're not. Like, no, we're just ready to go, right? And so, for your listening audience, like if you're feeling slow and like you need to make a decision, I would just encourage you, just one step, one foot in front of the other, and stop thinking about it. Because the longer we spend thinking about it and dwelling on it, the harder it's going to be to get into massive action. So I think you nailed that right.
Absolutely. Well, and the interesting thing is when we looked at from that moment, back when I started the podcasting, you were also starting the stages journey about building out some different events. You had the one Glover event at the golf course. Then you ran a really big event in Mississauga where Jay Papasan was actually one of the speakers there who wrote the one thing, which is just, I think, by the way, if anybody listening, if there's going to be a book you need to get, the one thing is a book that you need to get, because I walked out of there and I was sort of annoyed, to be honest, because I had just done a class with my team on how to better manage time and all that stuff. And then Jay shows up and completely rocks my world. I'm like, I got to do that class again.
Yeah.
And because it was just so important about how he organizes things on how you can do better time planning. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and this has been something I've really trying to build in my brain, is the idea of we have inception points that happen in our lives that where we make small changes that lead to big emotions later in life. And so I look at it and I liked how he started to really build out the idea of, where discipline sits, where motivation sits, and really the willpower to underpin all of those activities. And that you transition from the idea of you are who you are today, who you identify, and the discipline is going to bring you to where you're going to identify who you're going to be later on. And then underpinning that discipline with the willpower to keep on doing that. And that's usually feeding like successes, right? Or identification with successes, that this discipline, this system, this model that I'm following, that I'm going to stick to, actually has wins in it. Yeah. And I looked at that and I think, a lot of people, what they do is they'll go on to, like, even if they watch one of the shorts that come out of this thing, and like, oh, that motivated me. And then they're going to doom scroll to the next short. and they're going to doom scroll to the next short. And then they've gone through 15 different shorts. They get this dopamine drop of like, man, I'm so motivated, but then they don't do anything with it. And that's where the transition between being motivated and discipline, where discipline shows up where motivation doesn't, because it's a system, it's a model.
Yeah.
And I think that whole thing that came out of Jay, I've just been chewing on this for months after that event. I think it's been a few months, and it's just, I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I think it was just an amazing event that you ran. And it was number was amazing to see where you'd build from the one before to that one, but then just that there was so much actionable content that came out of it. And I think that was super important.
Well, and you know, the funny thing about that is, so that started from a conversation. I've got multiple different coaches and mentors, which I think, again, people devalue how important that is. And so I was chatting with one of my coaches, and I was really down on myself. And it ties all into that same time of life where I was having, I wouldn't call it self-doubt, but I was feeling a loss of passion. And I teach on this sometimes, and I talk to people about it, where it's like, you know, people are like, oh, you're just not feeling motivated. I'm like, you know what? That's bullshit. And that's not actually a real thing. And it's in my opinion, and people, we can argue this all day, I believe people lose passion. And when you're really passionate about something, motivation is automatic. So if you have to motivate yourself, it's probably because you're not passionate about it. And so I was talking to my coach, and we were having one of those moments, and he's like, you know, I can feel you slipping. What's going on? I said, you know, I'm missing something. I'm not sure what it is. And he said, well, what if you started to create a world that you could actually get what you wanted, and then other people could benefit from it? And that's how I started down the journey. Podcast was first, and then public speaking and everything else that followed that. And so I looked at it and I said, okay, well, when we did the Glover event, Jeff had just done like record breaking sales in like, we're talking in Detroit, for those people that are listening, where the average sale price is nothing to talk about. And there's still half of the state that's empty. And so here's this guy who's doing incredible things in the middle of like the water crisis with Flint and all these other things, and he's growing his business. And I thought, I really want to hear him speak. And then it went, well, what if I just did something that he had to come speak at? And then from there, I'm going to get the content, and everybody else is going to benefit through it. And that's how it started. So when we did the recent one, and that broke a ton of records, and we brought in other groups in to support that as well, it was exactly the same thing. Was I really respect Jay. I've heard him speak a couple of times, but I hadn't heard something in depth with him, and I hadn't spent any time with him. And so when we looked at putting on the For Love of Real Estate event, it was like, okay, how can we take what we already are doing? We're speaking to people, we're doing it. How can we provide it on a grand scale where I'm going to get a ton of value and content out of it, which I've gotten. Thank you to all our speakers. But then how can everybody else in the room leave with something they can go do in their own businesses? And so I think we accomplished that. Like, it wasn't your fluff and, you know, some of those things you go to that you walk out and you're like, yeah, I had a great day, but you know, I'm still in the same spot. I wanted everybody to be able to take one thing, go home, implement it in their business, and live a better life. And what my coach reminded me of is he pulled out my why, which is centered in helping others achieve their goals. And he said, that's what you're doing right now. And that's why you're passionate about it. And that's why it's become so easy, where now, whether it's this podcast, any other podcast that I'm a guest on, or speaking on stage, or coaching or leading, it's helping others. And if you can find what that thing is, then you never have to worry about motivation ever again, because it's just going to show up every single day, and you'll work 14 hours a day because you love what you're doing. So
absolutely.
No, I really good shout outs there, because you've been able to see it. Like, our relationship has allowed us to watch virtually side by side at the growth, and being able to sit with you and sort of go, oh my God, what you guys have done in the podcasting space, from a simple conversation that you and I had a year or so ago to where you are today. And then the reverse of where I was and where I am today. It's beautiful to watch. And people,
it was 9 months ago when we had that conversation. It would have been in September. Yeah.
Well, people really underestimate the value of time compounded over time.
Most people, I think it came from Bill Gates, where he said most people overestimate what they can get done in a year and underestimate what they get done in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, everybody looks at today as the day, and it's not like this is the year. And to be able to go from not having a podcast to having a podcast, to then being an authority in the podcast space, to then having a team who has an authority in the podcast space, that, you know, we every day we have people coming to our training. It could be anywhere between 50 to 60 different people each time at those training sessions. And it's super exciting to see that development happen. And people say, well, you've only been doing it for this amount of time. I'm like, well, people don't care about how long I've been doing it. They care about the results that happened out of it. And the results go to exactly what Andre was saying, is the relationships that I've built out of it. And personally speaking, is the revenue that's came out of podcasting. And I think that's really important. And then the ability to be able to communicate effectively because of podcasting.
And people underestimate that. Like, you just touched on a couple of huge points when you talk about revenue, right? And you go, we live in a world now that you can make money doing everything and anything. Doesn't matter. And people go, oh my God, how am I going to monetize it? And oh my God, just start. Monetization will come. The metrics are there. But if you don't ever start and you don't ever put content out there and be okay with it being absolute trash. I think that's one of the things, right? And, Glover talked about it, our buddy Jeff talked about it, and he said, I'm just willing to fail more than everybody else in this room. I'm not special. Failure is just fun to me. And I think if more people could adopt that in whatever it is they're trying to do, right? Public speaking, podcasting, doesn't matter. If you could adopt the fact that it's going to be really bad until it's really good, and you're not even going to know when it happens. Like, do you remember a specific moment where you're like, oh my God, all of a sudden I'm good?
That was when I was born, Andre. But I just don't remember it. You're right. It was the day I was born. Right? Yeah.
But there's not some magic section where you're like, oh my God, I'm really good at this now.
Yeah.
No, guys, you just gotta start.
Yeah, the matrix idea that you can just plug it in your head and I know jujitsu, it doesn't work. It's just not going to happen.
No, so you just got to do stuff. And I think, the podcasting content creation space, whether you like it or not, right? You see all these memes and all this stuff that's like, oh, I took a job and now I have to be a content creator. I would relate it back to something one of my first mentors said. And he said, everything is scripted or rehearsed. It's everything we say, right? Programming, we all have that, and we all speak certain ways because of how we were raised or our parents or whatever that is. So we all have a pre-diagnosed set of programs that we all kind of follow. And so whether you believe it or not, everything is a script and everything is said a certain way. You're just deciding.
I mean, the easiest proof on that is we're gonna run a script right now, Andre, and this will show that everything in this world is scripted. So we're gonna actually do that right now. So
let's do it.
We're gonna do a script. Ready? Are you ready to practice role play?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so ready? Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
There you go. We just did a script. That's a script that everybody runs. Everybody knows what the prompted response is going to be, and you're gonna say great or good. I'm okay. And you can say all that, even though if your cat just got run over, even though if you just lost your job, even whatever happened, you're going to say, I'm fine, I'm good. And because this is just what we're prompted to say.
Yeah.
And so everybody follows the same script.
Everyone's thinking about all those businesses they call, and you get that standardized script when they call, and hey, thank you for calling. Blah, blah. These are all just scripts. We're all trained in them every single day. I mean, call them dialogues, call them whatever you want. Just some of it's just a little bit more practiced and a little bit more rehearsed. And that's the only difference between being great at whatever your craft is and being mediocre, is just how much you're going to practice or invest in yourself. And that's it.
And we see this whole development of the idea of this when you look at AI. So when we look at the first inception of this sort of AI experience, was there'd be type yes to get this answer stop to do this, or type 45 if you want this code. Now AI has moved into this large language model, which is it can infer a response based on what it's been prompted to answer with. So it can respond in rhyme. I always love changing prompts around just to kind of mess with it. And so it can do all these different things because it's now looking at a larger approach to understanding the question or what's been said. And that's exactly what we do. We just look to a larger source of information to then give the answer, which is the scripted answer that we've been defined by our environment, by our learning objectives, and by who we are.
Well, and if you go back to kind of listening to that very first one we did together, I'm from the tech world originally, right? So when I was writing programs and building websites 21 years ago, I was the AI. It was me. I was doing the if statement and the but, and I remember having these huge workflow diagrams, and if this go here, and if this go here, and if not this go here, and somebody said it to me yesterday. I was in a meeting, and it came up, and she goes, "Oh my God, it makes so much sense in how you think because you are so black and white at times. There's no in the middle. There's no maybe." And AI is sort of that exact same thing where you either love it or you're afraid of it. And I think people really underestimate that it's a tool. We're not talking iRobot, not yet anyway. I mean, it's probably coming. You see all the weird stuff that they're posting about, these new robots and all this other stuff. But it's generated as a tool. And I think where people miss with AI, and even the stuff you guys are doing with AI is absolutely mind blowing, is when you're the one training it.
Well, that's where I would actually change a little bit of the verbiage around it. Is I would actually not call AI a tool. I would say AI is a resource, or AI, if you treat AI like you're hiring the AI to do something, then what you're going to do is when you hire somebody, what do you have to do? You have to train it. That's very different than programming, when you have to program something. Programming is giving it a binary set of yes and no's. AI is you're linguistically communicating with it in a way that you're going to say it's going to answer just like this with this kind of data.
And to just, I think if you're thinking you're not going to be able to embrace it and it's not going to go anywhere, well, that's already proven to be wrong. But I think where people are starting to realize is it's not just going to take everything over that we do. The human element is never going to go away. I believe.
Yeah, I think what it's going to do is it's going to challenge us to skill up, because a lot of the busy work that we've done that just kind of keeps us in the game is going to be taken over by AI. I mean, right now I could go and I could create 10,000 social posts from an AI algorithm and just have it automatically post with video, with content, with voice, with everything, and press a button and it's done.
Which is the value change, right? The value of what the human is going to provide is just different.
Yep.
That's really what's changed. And I think that's what scares people, right? And so, I was talking to my son about this, and he was like all geeked up on it. And I said, well, here's the difference though. I said, I believe that at some point, like, he's going into the trades. And I said, well, that's a really smart thing to do. And I said, because you're probably going to be the last industry that AI fully takes over. Now, yes, can an AI, scan a pipe and do all these other things? 100%. It's going to fill in that value. But I know for me, if I've got a plumber in my house and I want to make sure that nothing leaks again, I want to have that conversation with a human being at the end. I don't care how he got from point A to point B. Just that leak, that flood of water that's coming into my house, is it stopped? And can I have that human interaction to say, hey, am I okay now to turn my taps back on, and I can move on? So I think it's just understanding that the value of what we're doing is going to change, and there might be different things that help us get there, but it's not there to take away from you. It's there to enhance you and to make you better.
Well, if you think about it as hiring, exactly. And if you think about, I'm going to hire an employee to do this part of my business, well, it's the same thing. You're hiring the AI to do a portion of your business that now can be done by the AI fully and completely. And that doesn't mean that you don't manage it. It doesn't mean that you don't have KPIs on it. It doesn't mean that you're not skilling up and doing a better thing now. It means that it is now being put into your business and your ecosystem as a higher task.
Well, and I think the thing you can't teach is emotions. Right. You can give context to emotions, but I don't think you can actually teach a feeling to an AI bot, because everyone feels it differently. Like your anger and my anger are different versions of the same thing. So I can teach AI what anger is, but everyone feels it differently. Every single person has a different experience when it comes to that emotion. I think
we're going to say, I'm going to say that.
I'm going to say again. Hold on. I think for everyone watching, I want you to go back, because for one of the first times today, Steve had to sit back and he had to go, wait a second, let me think on that. And that's the beauty of doing these things is you're going to challenge your guests and both ways. I think we do that for each other all the time, but I would sit with that one a bit. And for everyone listening or watching, I would sit with it a bit as well. And think about your emotions, think about your partner, your kids, and everybody else. Everybody has a different reaction to all the same emotions. And I remember talking to a psychotherapist once about it, and she's phenomenal in her space and what she does. And we were doing an interview, and she said the reason for that is how big the range on the spectrum is for emotions. It's massively huge. And as humans change, evolve, and adapt, that scale never shrinks. That scale actually over time will just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because what might be, the old Step Brothers line where it's like, you don't want to see me at a 10. That was me at a 6. Everybody's 6 is a little bit different.
Yeah, my one emotion that I have the best is just is celebration. That's my favorite emotion right now.
Yeah.
That's the one that I always let bubble to the top every single time.
If
I have a problem, I'm going to go to celebration. Right. I'm going to personally program my emotions that I'm not going to let that anger take over, because anger to me is useless. And so it's a useless emotion to have. So I've just deleted it. I've hit the delete button to try to pull that out. I mean, that doesn't mean that sometimes I didn't delete all the file. There's like some legacy file that sits in there. But I generally try to not have that one percolate to the top, because I think if I can celebrate and say, oh my gosh, this thing went really bad. Well, guess what? It's an opportunity to make it better. Yeah. And this is a point that I can learn to do something better, either communicating with somebody else about the importance of the task, or communicating to myself of the importance of proper leadership.
Wouldn't you say, though, that's how you've been able to move as fast as you have, is because you're not dwelling on those failures? You're just constantly going, how can I be better?
Well, every day there's something that comes up that's going to be a problem, and it's going to landmine that you don't see. Yeah. And you've got to you know, like as what you said, is that I'm just going to make more failure decisions than anybody else, but I'm also going to make more correct decisions. I'm just making more decisions.
Just making more decisions and making
them faster. All it is make them faster. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Make decisions faster and just keep on moving.
Yeah,
and some are going to be the right. Cool. Some are going to be wrong. I'm okay with that too.
Well, and it's knowing that when you mess it up, you have an opportunity. So if I got it right first time, woohoo, that's amazing. Great result. I got it wrong. That's amazing. Great result. Either way, great result. And it's training yourself to go there and to be okay with it. And I think most people they struggle in that space because they don't know how to just accept failure and good as the same thing. And
absolutely. Well, and if you run into failure, the easiest way to solve failure is look for a bigger problem to solve. I mean, if you focus on the single problem that you have right there and then, and you're trying to solve that, it's so much better to go say, I'm going to focus on something that's even bigger, and then the problem becomes inconsequential.
Because you solve something. You say that's how you started down this podcast journey, right? Like you solved it. So we were doing it, and I remember both of us kind of going, okay, what resource are you using, and what platform, and what's the best one, and this, and we were like, oh my God, this is really, really painful. And
the biggest problem that I wanted to solve was, how do I make money doing this?
Right.
And if I solve that, then the problem of my tech, the problem of my, my voice, my vocabulary, my guests, whatever, like if I solve the revenue problem, everything else becomes not a problem.
Go.
And so that was the number one thing I had to solve. And I did.
And it led to massive growth by taking massive action and continuing to, when I listen to Steve talk about where you want to go and the next set of stuff that you're wanting to do, I'm like, wow, how do I become a client on that journey? Because it got so big so fast, like you said, 9 months, right? And that's that underestimation of what you can actually accomplish when you have singular focus and you push hard for it. Simply put, you can change the world.
And the singular focus can be towards a globalistic style objective. It doesn't have to be that I want to podcast. It's more like I want to grow revenue in all of my businesses from doing this thing, or I want to become a better leader. Well, how do I do that? Or I want to become recognized for the things that I'm doing in different spheres. I mean, one of the great things that came out of podcasting is I've now been on stages in the UK just recently. I was on stages in DC. I was on stages in Virginia Beach, and just the list are going on throughout the year. So the idea of just growing that ecosystem, growing those exposures, just happened from just doing. And it's just like what you did. You went from running like little events inside the brokerage to bigger events inside the golf course to bigger events at big event houses.
Yeah.
And so, what's next? So what
Well,
happens next for
it's
Andre?
funny you say that because I'm gonna give our friend Virginia Munden a shout out, right? 'Cause she's doing the Buzz conference. I know a lot of people attend her stuff, and her stuff's the next level, and it's even bigger. And so I remember chatting with Virginia, and I didn't think anything of it. And so shout out to Virginia for noticing and then making her next moves because I didn't think anything of it at the time. And she goes, "I would love to hear you speak even more, and I'd love to do something with you in the future." And then so yesterday, I'm just going through my emails and there's this email in there and it goes, "Hey, would you be open to talking about a keynote?" And I'm going, "For what?" So, we go back and forth a little bit and she finally says, "Hey, I'm doing this thing in the fall and I think you'd be a great keynote for it." And so again, if you just continue to add building blocks to what you're doing, bigger opportunities and bigger things will continue to show up. And that's something you and I talked about is going down that keynote space. And I think you had sort of made the same comment. You said, yeah, the events are great. When are you going to step in and do even more? Like you're speaking at a small level. Next step is to speak even more. And there it is. Things are coming out where people are asking me to do that already. So it's just progression.
Absolutely. And I think the progression, especially when you can point to the actual successes that you've made as well in that journey and point to the big mistakes that you've made in that journey that you can expose for other people that can stop them from running into the same problems.
Well, and what's funny too, Steve, is like I had someone say to me, I had a client reach out and so for everyone listening, like at the end of the day, I think Steve, I'm a realtor, right? Like that's where it started. Like let's just being brutally honest about it. Everything else I'm doing came off of selling and buying houses. And I had a client reach out and talk to her in a little while, and she reached out and she goes, "Hey, Mr. Big Time, do you still think you could sell a house?" And I went, "Oh my God, yeah, like I still do that."
But a lot of it's success through others, right? And
Right.
that is the best thing. I know with my mortgage brokerage, it wouldn't be where it is today if I didn't have amazing people within it. I
Yeah.
mean, we've got just unbelievable talent that you don't have to tell them what to do. They actually tell you what they've done.
Well,
And it's
who is it
just
that
such a
says it,
great
right?
environment.
Leadership is about creating other leaders and
Yeah.
helping other people get better. And
Yeah.
it's the loneliest path. So for all those people listening, it's like, "Oh my God, I want to go lead something." It's gonna suck. It's gonna be very lonely, and you're gonna be always wrong and always right. So just be okay with that. You're never gonna be winning in it. And
Yeah.
so, but you have to understand that if that's your calling, it's truly to help other people. And if you're helping enough people in your world, you're gonna have a really good life as well.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think the more people that you can bring in, and this comes with like big thinking too, because the more people that you want to bring in the world, the bigger you have to think to give space for them to be big in their world.
Right.
And that's what a really great leader does is they create the space, they create the environment so that the people in the world can do really amazing things.
Well, that can't be created unless you create a bigger world for yourself.
Yeah.
It cannot happen because if someone's living inside of your world and your world starts to shrink, because I believe in the theory that if you're not growing, you're dying. So your world is now shrinking and you've got this person expanding, and there's going to become a natural inflection point where they're going to press on your boundaries and they're going to be pushing on the outside of it. And you're going to either get really uncomfortable and grow really, really fast, or you're going to stay there and they're just going to take their world and move it outside of yours and
Yeah.
go somewhere else, because people quit leaders, right? They don't quit companies.
Yeah. 100% agree with that. So when we get to episode 100, Andre, where are we going to be at that point? What is that going to look like?
Wow, that's a big question. So I mean, if I got to forecast, so another 9 months of the journey. Well, I'm gonna be
Well, we're
a client
6
of
actually
yours.
now in the
Yeah.
trajectory we're going.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because you're shortening that, right? So in 6 months from now, where will we be? So you've challenged me to step into my superpower, which is actually not just hosting, running, and sort of speaking at events, but to actually do more keynotes and things of that nature. So my goal, whether it's in Canada or internationally, and probably a combination of both. I've got young kids at home, so I don't want to be on the road all the time. But I'd say that we're speaking at a minimum once a week in some facet that we're sharing. Your podcasting has quadrupled. I was going to say doubled, but I don't think you'll settle for double. So we're going to go quadruple. And I still think you'd be miserable about that it didn't 10x, as I see it right behind your head.
Yeah,
So I'm going
that's
to
where
go
it needs to be.
quadruple. And then the 6 months after that, you'll actually get the 10x. And so really, can I predict it? No. I just know it's going to be an exponential growth for both of our spaces at a level that most people probably didn't think was possible. And simplify. I take the easy out.
My vision when we get to the episode 100 is that you and I are going to find that the purpose that got us to where we are today is going to be further realized in that moment at that episode 100. And in the sense of, the communities that we've built, the impact that we've made with the people who are with us. My biggest celebrations are when you take somebody who's going through a moment of adversity and help them come around to that other side, and just having more impact that way. And I find that the more you can grow and bring people into your community, there are more options that you have to serve, because you might not be the perfect person to help somebody, but there's somebody right next door to you that's going to be the perfect fit to come in and execute and help that person to get to better. So my mission is to just bring amazing people into my ecosystem who can provide really great options.
Have you ever shared your podcast goal? You said it to me. I wrote it down. I don't know if you knew that I wrote it down. I actually just put a note in my phone. I do that after a lot of meetings where things impact me, and I go to this note thing that I have. It's literally titled "Andre's Crazy and His Friends," and I'll put stuff in there that either I realize or somebody else has said.
What did I say?
So you had said that your goal is not only every realtor, but every business owner should someday have a podcast or a version of a public speaking entity behind them. And that, I don't think you set a goal for what your business was going to be, but you just wanted to impact enough people that more people got in front of a camera or in front of a microphone. And I thought that was, you said it subtly and then you moved on and you didn't talk about it at all. And I thought, jerk, because I need more information on what that looks like. And then B, what a cool goal to have, that you just want to empower more people to get into a space that you believe, and I believe as well, but you truly believe that everybody needs to be in this space with as business owners. I wouldn't say everybody, anyone that's leading or in a business ownership setting needs to have a voice and something out there. And you sort of subtly just said it, that you want everybody, and you want to be a litmus for that, or some sort of way in which people can all achieve that. I thought that was so brilliant and such a big thing.
Well, there's a thing when you look at I think it's called entropy, when you look at the change of state between water and a gas. And when you look at the change of state between water and gas, when water increases in temperature, it's 1 BTU is the amount of energy required to heat a pound of water by 1 degree. But then when it goes from the change of state of between a liquid to a gas, it actually needs to absorb 812 BTUs in order to do that change of state. And a lot of times what we see is that, to go from where we need to be to where we need to get to, it's the same amount that we're putting. And then there's this blow up point that happens, but we're not seeing anything happen. As that 812 BTUs is being absorbed, it seems like nothing's happening. Then all of a sudden a change of state happens. And I think that happens with a lot of times when we're doing stuff, we don't see the outcome that happens. And then all of a sudden people look at us like 6 months later, they're like, oh my gosh, you've totally changed, but you never noticed anything. And I find that really interesting as this journey's been going on, is not only the changes that I've tried to make personally, and I think they've, some of those objectives have been achieved, but the people I'm surrounding myself with, and they're going through massive changes as well. And you can see that. And I think that's the super exciting thing about the next 6 months, is what more new things can happen.
Is that I want to ask this question because I hear this all the time, and is that uncomfortable for you, that change? Because knowing that you're leveling up and knowing at the pace that you're leveling up, and you're talking about who you're surrounding yourself with, which tells me that you are constantly reinventing the people that are getting time from you. You're constantly elevating that. Is that uncomfortable with the people that are falling off, or are you just not attached to it at all?
Well, I know there's going to be people that are going to not be comfortable with the changes that I've made. And I know that's going to be a problem. And then I have to choose, do I want to be the person that I was, or do I want to be the person I want to be? And that's a hard choice. I mean, there's people that I used to go out drinking and partying with that I don't hang around with anymore because I don't drink and party. And so that is just out of my ecosystem. I'd rather go out and work. I'd rather go and work out. I'd rather go and talk big things. And so the idea is, yeah, you're going to have those people fall off, and some of them are going to be really close to you. And that's going to be a tough call. And some of them are going to be, you're just not the person that, I really liked. And now you're this weird, only business person and whatever. And it's, well, times are changing, and I got to change too. And if we're not going to be in the same ecosystem, we both have to just reconcile that.
Yeah. When I've gone through that journey myself, right? And I'm still going through that journey. It's constantly evolving, constantly happening. I think that was one of the first things I had to get comfortable with. Because you love all these people and everything else. And it can at times, like you said, some of these people are going to be really close to you. They might even be your family. They might be someone that, you've respected and looked up to your entire life. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't serve that purpose to stay in that conversation. It's not that they're bad people, but you have to get really uncomfortable with making that next change for yourself. And I don't think enough people do it.
Exactly. And I think there's a friendship for every element. Like, you're going to have your friends that you'll never talk business with, and that's okay. You're going to have your friends that you're going to always talk business with. That's okay. You're going to have friends that are always going to talk family. You're going to do certain events, and there's nothing wrong with segmentation and having it. I think that's very super helpful. And I think it's really important to have that. I mean, I'm not going to go talk to my mom about, a lot of the business strategies that we're doing, not because I don't respect her opinion. I just think that I'd rather spend that time with her, really building the relationship that we have, and not going down a path that just doesn't add benefit to either of us. And so, it's having those relationships for that, but you have to know, we all have 24 hours in a day.
That's it.
And that goes back to the one thing with Jay Papazon, right? We've got to focus on that one thing that's going to push the needle. And I think that's really important.
When I don't think people look at time, and I know we're almost out of time, and you and I, we get together and we could talk for hours and hours and hours on end. But I don't think enough people look at time in the same way that the rest of us do, right? And I think one of the best ways I've heard it done recently was by Arnie, and he, his book, great listen. I mean, I thought it was a great listen. I know other people that haven't loved it, but there's a section in it where he talks about time, right? And he kind of just chunks it out, and he's like, okay, so you're sleeping for 8 hours. Great. So we take that off the top right away, and now you've got 16 hours. Well, you're working for 8 hours. Okay, great. So now we're down to the last 8 hours. And he said, this is the part that most people just don't ever look at. They don't look at the fact that they still have a remaining 8 hours, and that 4 of those is probably watching TV. An hour of that's probably, sitting at scrolling reels, maybe 2 hours of that. And then he kind of chunks it down, and you go, all of a sudden you've used up your 8 hours. Whereas if you were purposeful and you said, okay, I'm going to give my kids this much, I'm going to give my family this much, and then I'm going to carve out an extra hour, just 1 hour a day for myself to do whatever the thing is that I'm not doing or that's so important to me, whether it's the gym, my business, my this, my that, whatever it is, just that 1 hour. And I give it that 1 hour every day over the course of 365 days. And the compound interest on that thing you want to change in your life,
massive,
drastic it would be.
Massive. Yeah, I think that's so critically important. I think the more that people can be very precise with how they spend their time and really look at saying, am I spending time or investing time? I think that is just a massive, massive decision.
What's the one thing we have it's a finite resource.
Yep.
Once spent, we never get it back. And it's the one thing that most people don't actually put any purpose to. They just kind of float along. And
well, speaking of that, Andre, I am so happy to have invested the time with you in making this podcast together.
Same
and
here,
being
brother.
number 50, being number 1 and number 50. And I'm looking forward to number 100. And let's make the world an amazing place, one relationship at a time, one decision at a time, and one selection at a time. And it's been a true pleasure doing this with you, and look forward to the next one.
Always, my friend. Thanks for having me. Can't wait to hear number 100.
And guys, this is the money, this is the mindset, this is the mentoring podcast. We will see you on the next one.